Alright, what's up, y'all? It's Lee. Today I'm going to give you guys a breakdown on my song Sober. Sober was the first single and the opening track off of my EP Love Myself, which is out now. It's got 5 tracks. It's on iTunes and Spotify. If y'all want to check it out, go ahead and give it a listen. But today, for you all music nerds who love to see the breakdowns of songs and the production, how they're mixed and all that, I'm going to give you guys a little insight on how the song Sober was created. So the song starts off with a very simple little pad here, which is just doing a single note. And now this just kind of acts as something to give a little bit of a looming feeling, a little bit of tension, which I'll use that word a lot for this song. And it also just kind of acts as the glue for the rest of the song. All these instruments come together with this little sound here. So for the first verse, we have the piano come in. So it's just straight chords, and this pretty much follows throughout the rest of the song. As the chords change as well, this piano is just doing the same thing. It doesn't really do anything more interesting than that, but together it kind of has this nice little atmospheric sound to it. Of course, we have the lead vocal to kick the song off, very dainty, low-key vocal.
I'm trying to be sober, but I'm weak.
Yep. So that's that, and then as this little verse nears an end, we have this little string swell come in, which is just doing single note. And this really starts building the tension. Something's about to happen. That just single note there just kind of has a really ominous feeling. Now, a couple of other interesting things happen here. We have the drums kick in. Now, these are very simple drums. It's just electronic kick, side stick, hi-hat, and some tambourine. Still very small, but still kind of gives you a feeling like something more is going to happen. We have a little guitar interlude here. Very ambient, distant sound. Only happens for a couple seconds there. It just kind of helps fill in that space. And then one of my favorite elements about the song is I have this little vocal chop from the original demo of Sober, which was made nearly 2 years ago. And it's just a cut of my voice where I sang Sober, pitched up a little bit. Just kind of sounds a little cool, but something about the tone of it just seems very hopeless to me, which is a really, really big feeling about this song, is kind of hopelessness. So all together, we get this. Got the second verse. On the second verse here, we have bass kick in, which is just a synth sub bass. If you hear, though, it actually kind of ducks down a little bit a few times. That's because it's side chained to the kick drum. So every time the kick drum hits, it drops the volume in the bass, which gives the low end of the mix a lot more room, and it also just kind of helps create a little bit more energy as far as that goes. So moving in before the pre-chorus, the strings start swelling up again, only this time instead of single note, you hear a little bit more to it. There's a lot more chords going on, which eventually leads to the pre-chorus where the strings are just full-on orchestra. But you got the build up here. So it starts coming in, and then pre-chorus hits. Very, very beautiful string line, I think. And it's kind of building up. It's raising in volume, but it's also kind of the notes are working their ways up on the key. So that's that. The drums have a little bit of a breakdown here. They go from this little, they go from that kind of groove down to this very orchestral marching snare-ish pattern, along with some live recorded hand claps. So once again, it kind of gives you this building feeling. And then the most interesting part of this on the pre-chorus here is actually probably the vocal. So you got the lead vocal, which goes into this very falsetto, like that. But then it builds some harmonies, that kind of pan back and forth on the speakers. And this is the first appearance of what is probably the hook of the song more than anything, because this makes a reappearance on the post-chorus, just on sang a little bit differently. So all together, you get that. Of course, the strings are still full-fledged here. Get a little vocal chop there in the background. Then it builds up, and then it drops. Now, this is a really interesting thing to do because it's kind of giving the people the opposite of what they're expecting. They're hearing this build and they think something really big's about to happen, and then it swells up and then it just stops. And it kind of leaves you wondering, like, well, what's this space about? But then it's actually kind of tricking you, and then the really, really big moment is about to happen. It just has that little break in there beforehand. So, talking about that, the most interesting thing, in my opinion, is the drums. Because up to this point, they've been very, very sparse, very minimal. And then at this moment, we get these really, really big hitting drums. It's doing a very simple pattern. It's just kick, snare, kick, snare. Excuse me. But the way that they're recorded and the way that they're mixed, it makes them sound super grand, super big. It's one of my favorite things about this song, and it really sells this first big hit of the album. Again, it's very simple. You still got the marching snare going on in the background, but that kick, I mean, it just echoes through, throughout the whole song. Get a little stutter kick in there. So that's a really cool element. Strings are doing the same thing they were in the pre-chorus here. And then this is also the first introduction we see of some prominent guitar recordings. So we just have a very basic rhythm guitar left and right that's just doing power chords, a little bit of an underlying lead melody there. Once you hear it, very mid-2000s-esque, kind of rhythm. But it adds a little bit more grit to the song, it feels a little gutless without it. And then, of course, we have the lead vocal. Now, there's a lot of layers going on here, and that's kind of a thing throughout the whole album, is there's a lot of harmonies and layers. So I'll kind of break each of these down individually. So, obviously, we have the lead vocal.
Slowly losing everything, I drown my with a drink, 'cause I don't want to think it's over.
Very big, grand chorus. Of course, you hear the recording. It's not the most perfect recording. It was actually recorded in this room, which has terrible acoustics. I have a vocal booth back there, but for a lot of the album, I was just working spontaneously, so I would have a microphone with me, and a lot of times that would just end up being the final vocal instead of re-recording it, because once it all gets mixed together, it's barely noticeable. But that's the lead vocal, and then of course we have a double of it, a little more rough, left and right. This just helps create a little bit of width. And then we have two harmony tracks. So we have this harmony track.
Slowly losing everything, I'll drown my demons with a drink, 'cause
very simple harmony. And then we have a very head voice kind of, almost Bon Iver-esque sound. And then you put those all together, all the harmonies. Get that lead vocal.
I drown my demons with a drink, 'cause I don't want to think it's over.
Again, so it's like the weird thing about it is it's all these really complicated harmonies, but none of them are like perfect recordings. It's all very raw and very live, and but I think that really adds to it, makes it sound super big. So you put all these elements together and you just get the biggest impact in the world, especially for an album as sparse as this. Super cool. Alright, so moving on from this, the instrumental pretty much stays constant for a little while. Then we move into the post-chorus. Now this is doing the same thing as what the pre-chorus was doing earlier, just a little bit differently. So all the harmonies drop out, it goes back to just a single lead vocal right in the center.
Could it be?
Very head voice. Get a little reverb tail on it. Sounds a little strange on its own, but once it all comes together, it sounds super cool. Super emotional right there. Super emotional moment. So moving on from this, we go into the instrumental break of the song. So things change up quite a bit here. The drums stay mostly the same. We just lose the hi-hats, and it kind of just breaks down into this hand clap, tambourine, drum, kick drum hit. So that's super cool. Most prominently, we have a change in the strings. They go from this very sustained, beautiful melody to this very staccato-y, swelling, tense melody. Sustains back out there for a second, but then it builds right back in. Now, to counter that on the same thing, the electric guitar is doing a very similar thing. Although this time, the weird thing is that the strings go dun 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 dun. The guitar actually does one more beat after that, so it goes da 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 da. So it's kind of doing it's doing the same thing, but it's also doing a different thing. Gives a very kind of rock sound to it. And then there's a couple little elements here on the keys that are actually changing. This is the only time in the song they do anything different. And it's very hard to notice. It's one of those elements you can really easily overlook first time you hear the song. But there's a little, there's the piano. There's this though, which is just a very 8-bit synth that's arpeggiated up and down the key. And then along with that, you get the piano doing these little high notes. And then together they make this cool little moment there. I like that element a lot. That's probably very nerdy of me, but I think that sounds super cool because all together you get this. Love that moment because it's one of the times in the album that it's actually very blatantly electronic sounds. This is one of the more electronic songs of all of them because everything's very broken down and raw. So I love those little, electronic elements peeking through. So right before we hit the final chorus, we have the last little chorus breakdown. So it goes back down to piano and pad. The piano moves up an octave to kind of give it a little bit of a different sound. And then there is the lead vocal, which is actually the only one-take vocal in the whole album. Everything else was comped or re-recorded. This was literally, I grabbed a microphone in my hand and recorded it just spontaneously. I ran out of breath at the end of it even, but I kept it because I thought it sounded super cool. It's an octave lower than the rest of the courses. Down my demons with a drink, 'cause I don't wanna think. Here, I run out of breath here. I couldn't connect that over in the last little bit there, but I actually thought that added a lot to the human element to it. So you got that breakdown. And then chorus comes back. Super big. And then the last really big change that happens is on the post-chorus again. So, of course, we have the lead here, which is doing what it's always doing. But then we have the introduction of these little choirs on the side. Could it be? Could it be? Could it be? Now, of course, that's one of those elements, again, you can look over. But all together, it kind of creates this really cool, big high note here. I feel like that moment just really kind of ties the song together, It really lets you know, like, hey, this is coming to an end and this is everything, Like, I'm just releasing here. And then for the rest of the song, that pretty much stays. The choirs keep going through this little instrumental break. And then for one final moment, we have the song break down to piano and pad again, just like the beginning, and it repeats the first line of the song to kind of bring you back to that same little headspace. I'm trying to be sober, but I'm weak. But it ends on a little bit of a different note that time to kind of create this like weird feeling, if you feel like it should have concluded, but it ends. It doesn't end on, the root chord or the root note. It kind of leaves on this little weird section, which I tend to do in songs. I love doing that in songs because it kind of leaves you wondering. It's like it starves you of the satisfaction of having that final note there. But that's pretty much the song. So at the root of it, there's really not that much going on. It's just your drums, strings, guitar, bass, piano, keys, vocals. I just think it's the way that they're all presented that makes the song super interesting. This song's gone through a lot of versions throughout the years as I've demoed it, but I feel like this is really the optimal way it was meant to be. It's very orchestral, it's got a lot of electronic and rock elements to it, and I feel like it really, captures what the song's going for. But that's the breakdown, guys. I hope you all enjoyed and found something interesting about this. If you all want to hear anything more like this from me in the future, let me know. Until then, My Love Myself EP is out now on Spotify and iTunes. Go check it out. It's got 5 songs on it, including Sober. And I hope to see you all again soon.
I'm trying to be sober.